coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
It does seem clear that this is a guy who was being groomed to really become the next George Soros. Soros is very old. He doesn't look very good. I mean, for, just in terms of wellness, I'm not passing judgment on his how handsome he is or was. Seems to be, not in great shape. And doubtless has been thinking seriously, as many quite old gentlemen in positions of power do, about who his effective successor or heir is going to be. And SBF seems to be the guy who was and arguably still is best positioned to take on that role. His major donations to the Dems are a matter of public record. He had clear designs on making an even bigger impact on 2024, which is also a matter of public record. And his behavior as someone who was being utilized by a number of interests to try to capture and consolidate as much of the crypto market and infrastructure as possible under a single roof, and then to ensure that the SEC, among others, was able to play nice with that entity, all strongly suggests to me that the grand design here was something sort of like Elon Musk is talking about with his X, the app for everything. And you can look at SBF's comments and he's like, yeah, you should be able to do anything with FTX. You buy a banana, you can whatever you want. And so it seems to me that whether it's Soros or SBF Plex or a number of other players, there is this kind of quiet race on for one app to rule them all.
Hello, and welcome to the Roundtable, or should I say the RT, your TAM podcast. We're going to be running through so many different abbreviations that I feel like we have to get in on the fun. This is your weekly Publishers and Editors podcast from the American Mind, and I am your host, Spencer Clavin, features editor of the American Mind and associate editor of the Claremont Review of Books. And today I am joined by editor James Poulos and managing editor Seth Barron. So we are going to start here with a big one that will probably take us some time to dig into. I'm going to do my best to mansplain the FTX debacle, and then I'm going to invite James to James-splain the FTX debacle because I feel laughably, woefully incompetent to dig into just all the ins and outs of this truly Wagnerian drama playing out before us. The precipitous fall from a great height, the intrigue of palace coups and double dealings and rivalries. Really, you can't make this stuff up. And I suppose I shouldn't be laughing about it since a lot of people have lost a lot of money. But let's try and just outline what is going on here for those that are not terminally online, that haven't been following this in such detail. Where to begin? FTX is a cryptocurrency firm that serves basically as a middleman. It's an exchange. It's where you can acquire various different cryptocurrency tokens, various different kinds of currency at FTX. Its CEO is named Sam Bankman-Fried. So the CEO of FTX is SBF, and we're only getting started with the acronyms and the abbreviations. And in any case, FTX has recently rocketed to prominence. They've been getting huge celebrity endorsements. I think Katy Perry gave them a nod. They had a Super Bowl ad. They have really just become very front and center, and they've tried to become front and center. SBF himself is a very, high profile or wants to be a very high profile CEO, known in crypto circles for doing a lot of lobbying or just, maybe that's the wrong word, for talking to politicians a lot about regulations. Politicians seem to like him, especially Democrat politicians, for being the kind of guy that'll work with you on crypto regulations and so on and so forth. Perhaps no surprise then that SBF was the second biggest Democratic donor, right below George Soros in the 2021 to 2022 election. That's this latest election cycle. And it goes further. His mom, Barbara Fried, who's on the faculty at Stanford, leads a group called Mind the Gap, which is a fundraising group that gets money from Silicon Valley to donate to Democrats. His dad, Joseph Bankman, drafted tax legislation for Senator Elizabeth Warren. So enter player number one, Ready Player One. CoinDesk, which is an online news site for cryptocurrency related matters, has been publishing reports, one of which in particular, and I should say that all of this has happened in a very short span of time. And we're talking about like last week, I think the really explosive CoinDesk report came out, and gradually a range of information has been revealed, including that Alameda, which is kind of the it's SBF's old firm, and FTX emerged from Alameda. His girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, is the CEO. It turns out that Alameda has a lot of FTT on the balance sheet, and that's FTX's cryptocurrency. So they've got a lot of currency from this other firm that is intimately related to them. And that's like a lot. And we're going to get into some numbers in a sec here. But basically, we're looking, it seems like, at a kind of codependent relationship of exactly the kind people always fret about when you start talking about cryptocurrency. People start asking, well, are these basically just like two companies that are feeding off of each other, and there's no there? Like there's no kind of cash, there's no stable sort of liquid asset that these numbers refer to. And it should be noted that Ellison herself, in videos that I have seen passed around of her, seems remarkably kind of blithe and maybe even ill-equipped to answer these questions. There's a lot of hand waving, so this gets like yet dicier. Enter Changpeng Zhou, otherwise known as CZ. And CZ is the CEO of Binance, which is the world's biggest crypto exchange by volume. So the same kind of company that FTX is, but even bigger. Now, CZ and SBF have a history. SBF, known for doing all this kind of interaction with lawmakers over regulation. CZ, among others, kind of skeptical of these efforts. SBF mocked CZ on Twitter in the tweet heard round the world, or at least round the crypto water cooler, that he was not allowed into DC to begin with to lobby. So he's just jealous because I guess he's initially from China and now seems to live in Vancouver. And so this guy has sort of lobbed some jabs at CZ over that. They're in a kind of tense relationship to begin with, whereupon CZ liquidates his assets on FTX, meaning, show of no confidence, display of, lack of trust, backs out. Other people who follow, lots and lots of people follow CZ, so other people sort of back out. Value of the currency starts dropping. The other cryptocurrencies are kind of, tied up to the value of FTT, so the value continues to drop. And basically, at this point, we are looking at a headlong crash, a fall from glory on the part of SBF. Many, many people still will be waiting for a long time to know whether they're going to get any kind of payout from the money they had invested in this whole thing. CZ initially offered, in a kind of surprising turn of events, to buy out FTX, and then that kind of fell through, it seems. And ultimately, we are looking at a thoroughgoing mess and a moment for crypto that will probably be remembered as part of its history. I should say that I don't think this is the end of crypto's history, but it's certainly a quite remarkable and involved crisis. James, what did I miss? What did I get wrong?
Well, first of all, sorry, Seth, you want to jump in?
Well, I just want to say, there's also a whole Ponzi scheme aspect to this, where he was taking money out of FTX, customer money, and using it to cover losses at Alameda. Yeah. And that's like that's really the essence of like the scandal at this moment. I think it gets a lot broader, but I just wanted to make sure that was foregrounded.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's important. And Spencer, I commend you on walking through that whole string of facts. As Mitt Romney once said, the weeds matter. Weeds are important. I'm going to try to just take a big step back here. There's clearly a sort of Ponzi angle here. As I recently tweeted, I would recommend opting for a Polis scheme over a Ponzi scheme. You can buy my book. for Bitcoin in 3 wonderful flavors of Bitcoin. I haven't bankrupted anyone. I haven't stolen anyone's money. The intrinsic value of the asset has only increased over the past year or so since Human Forever made its debut. So, I think that this whole fiasco has many layers, and one of those layers is it is an opportunity for people to insist that, quote unquote, all of crypto is a scam and always has been, when in fact it only takes a handful of people selling some books on the internet for Bitcoin to reveal that no, in fact, it is not all a scam, and it has never all been a scam. And whether or not it is used in a scammy way is contingent upon the character of the human beings who are using the technology, almost as if you can generally state as an axiom of technology that the quality of the results that you get out of the technology are in fact contingent on the quality of the people who are building it and operationalizing it. So I think, that's one of the easier kind of threads to pull on this. More difficult are threads such as, well, how much of what's going on here has to do with US-China relations? There does seem to be some evidence floating around that various investor groups with a significant stake in FTX's success either relied on Chinese markets and or the Chinese regime to a significant degree for their own financial success, or were just generally bound up in the sort of trans-Pacific financial and economic activity that would make them, let's say, ambivalent about whether or not China happened to be outcompeting the US. I'm not going to take us down that rabbit hole here. I think suffice it to say that this is more evidence, certainly to me, and I think to some others, that there are deep and hidden roots to the dynamic we see playing out, where Russia is every day presented to us as the worst thing ever to exist on planet Earth, and China is presented as just sort of like a difficult child that you have to kind of accommodate, and don't want them to become too spoiled, but well, maybe just this time we should make sure that they don't throw a fit. And there are deep reasons for this, and I think one of the deepest is that at the end of the day, many of our elites, I think they make up some kind of faction. I'm not going to speculate as to how formal that group is. It's probably a pretty big group. Would, at the end of the day, prefer to merge our socioeconomic system with China's rather than go to war with China. Whereas at the same time, they would much rather go to war, perhaps a really, really full-blown war with Russia, than accommodate Russia in any way, be it economic, cultural, or other. There's another thread that we could tug on here, and that pertains to the domestic political scene. Based on the barrage of SBF interviews that it seems to be impossible to get from one end of your feed to the other without encountering, it does seem clear that this is a guy who was being groomed to really become the next George Soros. Soros is very old. He doesn't look very good. I mean, for just in terms of wellness, I'm not passing judgment on his how handsome he is or was. Seems to be not in great shape, and doubtless has been thinking seriously, as many quite old gentlemen in positions of power do, about who his effective successor or heir is going to be. And SBF seems to be the guy who was and arguably still is best positioned to take on that role. His major donations to the Dems are a matter of public record. He had clear designs on making an even bigger impact on 2024, which is also a matter of public record. And his behavior as someone who was being utilized by a number of interests to try to capture and consolidate as much of the crypto market and infrastructure as possible under a single roof, and then to ensure that the SEC, among others, was able to play nice with that entity, all strongly suggests to me that the grand design here was something sort of like Elon Musk is talking about with his X, the app for everything. And you can look at SBF's comments and he's like, yeah, you should be able to do anything with FTX. You buy a banana, you can whatever you want. And so it seems to me that whether it's Soros or SBF Plex or a number of other players, there is this kind of quiet race on for one app to rule them all. And that sort of app is something that would be able to lock people in the social credit system. It would be something that would allow people to engage in political activity in what I think would be a fundamentally new sort of way, at least structurally, and not necessarily compatible with our form of government. And to see that, at least as of the last time I checked, which was, I think, yesterday, SBF is still on the roster for the New York Times Big Deal Book Summit, next to luminaries such as the mayor of New York and CEOs of Netflix and Amazon and TikTok.
And Zelensky.
Yeah, well, of course, yes. The Zelig of politics is going to be there as well. The Clintonian levels of intending to not go away and, in fact, to only grow stronger as a result of the scandal, probably for quite similar reasons. This guy is part of a very powerful interlocking system of public and private actors, and it seems he's very cavalier in the way that he's just trying to continue to tweet reporters and do interviews. And it's the behavior of someone who does not have the fear of God in them, does not think that they're going to jail, does not think that their standard of living is really maybe even going to change significantly. Nice work if you can get it. And this story is far from over.
Yeah. This story is not only far from over. Like when it broke, I was like, okay, well, this is what we're going to be hearing about for the next 5 years. Like this is Theranos times Madoff times, I don't know, the housing crunch meltdown. It's so enormous that I feel like there's going to be so many books written about it. The one thing that just kind of fascinates me and obviously fascinates everybody is this guy with his weird diffidence and his strange appearance, which I guess was supposed to be he wears a dirty t-shirt and sneakers and a pair of cargo shorts, and he claims to be an EA, which is an effective altruist. This is this new cult of people who believe that they will do good through very skilled application of their wealth to very specific targets and maximize. It's this weird sort of utilitarianism. They have this culture. He and his girlfriend and all of his college friends moved down to the Bahamas and live in some kind of palace, like $100 million palace. But something that fascinates me about it is they're apparently all really into drugs, but it's like drugs. They take drugs, and it's like this seems very Silicon Valley to me, and this is an aspect of Silicon Valley culture that is having a big influence in America, but I think it hasn't really been scrutinized. This idea of mind hacking and I will microdosing and effective use of smart drugs to give you an edge. Apparently these people down in the Bahamas at FTX were amphetamines were just standard. It was you take stimulants to keep you going. And in fact, Caroline Ellison, who was his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend and the head of this, investment company, she would say once you're on once you start taking amphetamines, and I think she wrote this unironically, you realize how dumb everyone else is because you have this edge. Now, I think a lot of what's going on with this whole crash is it's the kind of irrational exuberance of taking drugs and thinking that the insights you're having are genuine and revelatory. So she believed she was the person in charge of risk management for a multi-billion-dollar investment fund, which enormous banks were giving money to. BlackRock, the Ontario Teachers Retirement Fund gave her hundreds of millions of dollars. And her view was that risk management is kind of dumb. Effective altruists believe in double or nothing bets. Like, why take a bet where you're only going to get like at most like 6% a year or even like 15% a year? No, you have to go for you need to double your money like all the time. And if it doesn't work, well, so be it. You're kind of like you're one of the it's like taking like an Apple commercial from 20 years ago and like that's really like your model of yourself. Like, I just think different. I break boundaries. I'm like looking beyond the normal. So apparently they had like some weird like sex thing going on with like they were like a all polyamorous. I mean, it's essentially like if a bunch of nerds in a dorm somewhere at like Harvard or someplace were given like $10 billion and told to enact all their fondest fantasies. I just find the whole thing completely, it's so bizarre, it's so weird. I mean, evidently there's like questions that, was this like an enormous money laundering operation on behalf of Ukraine? I mean, there's so many bizarre aspects to this. I know I just keep saying that. Anyway, we have only begun to scratch the surface of the enormous perversity and the fact that this guy is clearly so well connected at the high. I mean, there's pictures of him sitting on stage with Tony Blair and Bill Clinton, like talking about
Clinton
all
is like a big fan. Yeah, they were really tight.
Yeah. I mean, let me just say one thing. There's a funny clip where I guess Tom Brady was like an investor or a sponsor. And there's this thing where Tom Brady is talking to his phone. He's like, well, I'm here with Sam at the crypto meeting talking about crypto. And Sam Bankman-Fried is sitting there kind of like nodding in this weird way. And it's clear. And then he just like leaves the frame. And it's kind of like, oh, he needs another hit. I mean, that was kind of what it looked like. Like he just sort of like walks off, and Brady is like, "Oh, Sam, where'd you go?" Yeah, that's all. That's all I wanted to say. It's just really strange.
Yeah, I mean, look, the drug use that is involved, and this is just a matter of sort of enterprising people taking a look at various screenshots and video stills and going like, oh, right, I know what this prescription is. These are basically like cognitively performance enhancing drugs, at least notionally, for people who do not have any kind of mental illness or disorder, but which are prescribed to manage said disorders. And, the attitude is one of like, well, if you're just merely human, then you suck.
Yep.
Yes, exactly.
And so, what turns you from just being a crappy human being that is unworthy of esteem in your being. What will save us from that is engineered chemicals, is science, is mathematics applied to this sort of meat puppet that we have the misfortune of being trapped inside of. And that dynamic, obviously the more orgiastic elements of the dynamic, these are all familiar aspects of cults, especially as we have known them since the 60s or so. But even as Spencer could no doubt spend multiple podcasts talking about since ancient times.
God forbid. Yeah.
Yes. This is just kind of the return of classical Gnosticism in new garb, and certainly nothing to be shocked about. What is new, however, is that we do have this entrenched class of quote unquote elites, many of whom are, public in figures in name only, and all or almost all of what they do, despite having this celebrity sheen to them, is completely secret and completely withheld from any kind of public scrutiny or public accountability. This class of folks is definitely hell-bent on using their money to create cult leaders whose job it will be to act as a kind of onboarding funnel for the youth into these new forms of social organization that are being cooked up and implemented by, again, people at the top who are completely absented from any kind of political process. You cannot vote for them. You cannot vote them out. You cannot vote to have them removed from their positions of power. There is simply no getting to them. That is new. And this whole episode, at least as it's unfolded so far, seems to be, I think, as clear of evidence as any American really needs to recognize that a system designed to replace our form of government, and in that fundamental sense, replace our country, is being built. They are going to build it. And if they fail, it's going to be because of the properties of the system itself. It's really hard to see how they can be stopped through, any ordinary levers of sort of like, some people are like, your ballot is your bullet in the cold Civil War. Just keep shooting, folks. And, you don't have to be like a conspiratorial anything or a black pillar of any kind to just kind of recognize that, like, well, we do have this sort of group of folks, and they have managed to seal themselves off from political accountability, and they are going to pursue what they are pursuing quite openly as far as it goes, but also in ways that are thoroughly insulated from interference. They have the connections, they have the money, they have the motive, they have what they need. And so as many Americans sort of stagger toward the holidays going like, wow, well, things are even more sort of messed up and out of control than ever before. And maybe someone will come along and tell us what to do. Well, I'll come along for what it's worth. And I will tell you to do this. I'm not saying that you should give up on trying to, combat in whatever way your adversaries in political life, but it really all comes down to the foundation of, what are you building? What are you building in your own life? What are you building with those around you? And what is it intended to do? If we are not telling technology what to do, if we are not instructing, commanding our compute to do things that strengthen us, then there's not going to be any other alternative but to be sucked into the kinds of systems like FTX that are being built around us. If we are in a position where we have to basically hunker down and wait for these things to blow up, as FTX has, it won't be the last. It wasn't the first. It won't be the last to blow up. We need to be sure that we're busying ourselves with things that will not blow up, that will be generative. The seed that we plant today will bear fruit for, hopefully, God willing, centuries.
Yeah, I want to talk. I mean, well said, James. And Seth, the drugs thing is really interesting. And like, I want to talk for a sec about like the kind of Ubermensch aspect of the whole thing. Like, FTX was supposed to be, one of their kind of branding moves was to code themselves as the platform that you can go to if you don't really understand that much about crypto, and it's all kind of complicated and there's like a lot of big words, and like, we'll just take care of it for you. Like, we're the everyman's crypto. And like, if you don't understand any of it, that's okay. Like, come hang out with us. And there does seem to have been underlying that this idea that Seth was talking about, which is like, because you are pitiful homunculi and we are like the new race, the new kind of, homo deus, the future of humanity is like manifest in us. And it does strike me, I know it's sort of uncouth to like comment on people's appearances, but like, the difference between the inner experience of somebody who thinks that way, I'm hacking my brain, I'm taking amphetamines, I'm like, my consciousness is opening, and then the like outer aspect of that person. I mean, both Caroline Ellison and Sam Bankman-Fried, it has been noted, have this almost purposefully like schlubby, misshapen sort of just disregard for their physical forms, for like their bodies as traditionally constituted in meat space, like in a way that we might like to look at, or that might more importantly be kind of respectable as a mode of engagement with other human beings. Like, this is not limited to the drugs thing, although maybe that's the starkest, that you have this kind of like vast inner vision that you're hacking the world, but actually you're just like building a Ponzi scheme and doing like mystic rites that have been part of like human error since the beginning of time. Like it's also in all the like virtual reality stuff, right? It's like you put on this headset, you see this glorious future ahead of you, this glittering expanse, this vista opens up before you, but actually like you are just kind of slumped in a chair. And the minute you pull back the camera and look at it from the outside and acknowledge there is an outside, it's like, this is actually not all that attractive and people aren't all that interested in it. And it's kind of losing money at Meta. And this is all just sort of like lame and flaccid and sad. Like I am reminded of Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, in which he kind of like Dostoevsky's whole career is almost involved in like foreseeing the Übermensch, but like from the outside rather than from the inside out. And like this constant sort of muttering in the darkness about, oh, like I am the one who transcends morality and I go beyond the typical confines of the here and now. And like in point of fact, like he emerges into blinking into the sun and he's just kind of somebody that like other people feel the need to sort of step gingerly around. Like there is something to be said here, again, not to be uncouth, but for the recovery of like just kind of plain and simple notions of, well, like what does it really look like, you know, to your basic average observer? Like it looks like these are kind of like tawdry and self-involved, you know, people getting entangled in all sorts of like basic human venality of the kind that you could just like turn to the book of Proverbs to find described. I mean, it's not for nothing that like Nietzsche's first encounter with Dostoevsky was to find like Notes from Underground in a bookstore, and that this did kind of set him for a loop. You know, the reports of the Übermensch have been greatly exaggerated, at least from this angle, at least from like, well, I'm just gonna blast open the doors of my inner vision, and then your old traditional kind of outmoded ideas about outer reality or objectivity or like people that you might interact with, like these are all just completely last year. They're just very, they're very mid. That proposition just does not seem to be working out too well.
Yeah, precisely. And, you know, I mean, I just want to add one thing. Like I saw this interview where he's talking to some, older gentlemen, like financial type guys. No, I don't know if they were like Gen X or boomers or whatever. And I mean, they weren't being harshly critical. They were just saying, so I don't understand, because one of the Sam Bankman-Fried's like manipulations or one of his operations he would just invent a new like coin or token or, you know, crypto, you know, currency. And then, I mean, he didn't say he was doing this, but he would sell it back and forth to himself a bunch of times and then, you know, inflate the value and then call that an asset and get loans based on it. And, you know, this is just essentially like outright fraud. But so they're saying, well, what is the economic value of all of this? And he was basically saying like, well, you don't get it.
Yeah. What? Excuse me?
The economic.
Exactly. No, I mean, like that's his response is like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
like, what are you talking
about? Exactly. Like, so, yeah. And he would just sort of look at them like they were kind of like benighted, like, oh, how sad. You still think that one needs economic value to exchange it for money, for something, you know, to be real. It's very, very creepy. Very creepy. And you're right. I love the Dostoevsky thing where like the guy imagines that he's like essentially this, you know, I don't know, like some kind of grand medieval knight.
Yeah.
Like just like, you know, lording it over everybody. But in reality, he's like a very shabby. And it's so weird to think that like, I mean, I know like Zuckerberg does this too. Zuckerberg has actually, you know, and Jeff Bezos too, have both like really embraced this cult of physical, like they've really gotten into physical culture. And so they're very like, you know, they masculinized themselves enormously. I don't know if Sam Bankman-Fried ever would have done that, but you know, the idea of being like, well, I dress as plainly as possible, like Steve Jobs or whatever. But Sam Bankman-Fried took that to a new extreme. Like I dress like, you know, like the sort of person who wears like flip-flops all year round, even if it's like freezing, you know, just like basically like a homeless person, and dares you to say anything about it. I mean, there's something to be said for just dress codes, you know, even the most basic kind of, you know, putting on a pair of pants.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you have to look like Chris Pine. It's just that like the ostentatious disregard for any kind of like put together aspect is a little much. I have a question for you guys about this. I mean, this thing is kind of tailor-made to confirm everybody's priors about crypto, like 10x. You know, it just seems like everybody's going to look at this and it's going to be a Rorschach test. And I mean, I think like James said something to me really important at the beginning when he said like the value of a tool or of any kind of technology is basically in the people who use it. This is like not, in my view, an indictment of crypto, of like every idea behind crypto or the entire Satoshi white paper or whatever. But it does certainly seem to like enact all of the worst aspects of what crypto can do. And I would imagine that a lot of people on Capitol Hill are going to like look at it that way. And perhaps ironically are going to take the downfall of this like super pro regulation crypto guy as evidence that what crypto really needs is like a lot of regulation. So, I mean, what do you guys foresee? And like maybe James, this is directed at you, like as the kind of political fallout from this? Like, are we about to see an era of just really intense sort of SEC scrutiny of crypto generally, or is SBF too enmeshed with the powers that be for that to actually happen, or is it both?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a major push to ensure that ordinary Americans cannot get their hands on this method of conducting their economic and financial life outside of the federal system. That is bad. Yes, there are risks. Yes, fools can get owned using technology. Low has it ever been. If we are going to get any kind of legal protections with teeth so that Americans' implicit, basic digital rights, their rights to keep and bear computational devices and protocols, we are not going to get them out of Washington. We are not going to get them out of Congress or out of the alphabet agencies. We are going to have to get them at the state level. And listening to Donald Trump's remarks, I guess that was last night, he did not utter the word tech or technology. I don't think even one time. And so the ball is waiting to be picked up. And I think any state official, especially one with executive power and authority, has a real opportunity and arguably a responsibility to lead on this issue and to ensure that at least within their jurisdiction, Americans are able to do as they have always done and use basic fundamental technologies for their betterment and their protection.
You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to contradict James here, but maybe just for the sake of argument, I still don't really get I mean, I understand that the blockchain is a useful tool for, tracking things and so forth. But to me, unless you're like a child pornographer or like you want to sell or buy hard drugs internationally, or you have a lot of money that you're trying to like launder or hide from the government, I still don't really get what the point of cryptocurrency is. I mean, or as like some kind of toy, or as just for like, a speculative investment vehicle, which seems like what a lot of it is. People like, oh, I've got to get into this one or that one. So I guess I don't see it as like a core freedom.
Well, I think, briefly, for the sake of argument, at least,
okay.
Perhaps for other reasons, just to take a random example, books. Look at the process that you have to go through in order to get a quote unquote big five publisher, which is now, I think, effectively a big two publisher, to print up and distribute your book. Inevitably, a book that the author will be expected to promote themselves, that the author will be expected to promote by sort of groveling in a mass email to all of the contacts that they've ever amassed, no matter how attenuated, and to beg for those Amazon stars and to beg for those first week sales. And oh well, my editor said that I can't write this and I can't say that, and well, the publisher will never go for this, and heavy censorship, heavy editing, mandatory participation in these sort of corporate structures, going head to head against books that are just basically inflated with scam numbers on the bestseller charts, and you get some royalties, a pittance if you make back your advance, which also sucks, which is typically hardly enough to get you through, considering what other income you'd have to surrender. The whole process is terrible. Supply chain issues, oh well, there's no paper this year. I mean, that was a situation that a lot of authors were in during the darker days of COVID, and you look at how our supply chains are supposedly recovering, and you're not filled with that much confidence. The whole chain of economics and the whole social system around the book publishing industry is susceptible to and reflective of the same process of centralization and social control that is sweeping through every other major institutional framework in America. It's all being centralized, it's all being concentrated, it's all being manipulated, and it's all being done by the same cast of people. And so what is an American to do? Inflation keeps going up. Credit card rates keep staying high. It's not clear how any young person is really supposed to make real money, how they're supposed to get ahead. The real estate markets are a giant question mark right now, and indefinitely so. Interest rates keep going up. You are constantly disincentivized from saving money by your own government, and the very top corporations continue to grow, continue to consolidate, continue to master ever larger shares of the economy and master ever larger shares of people's everyday lives, all tightly woven into a thoroughgoing surveillance system where the end user has the lightest touch as possible with their technologies. People, know how to poke their finger in the right sort of way to get their phones to deliver them certain kinds of satisfactions, and that's about as sophisticated as their understanding of technology is. And all of the rest is handled behind the scenes by the ruling caste or its machines. That's not America. That system that I just described is totally discordant with and alienated from American life, American traditions, American institutions, the patterns of cultural and economic life, the expectations of how human nature is fulfilled and channeled productively. All that is going out the window. And what is an ordinary person supposed to do about it? Well, not much. There's not much that they can do about it. They can keep casting those votes. They can leave America for someplace that's in even worse shape. They can go live in the woods. Everyone can't go live in the woods. So what are you supposed to do? How do you fight back? How do you, even if you're not trying to primarily fight back, how do you build something that's going to last? And how do you do it in a way that that is immediately accessible to you right now, that you and others like you can participate in right now? And well, Bitcoin's sitting right there. Obviously, I'm going to make a big deal out of my book because I put work in and cared about what I was saying and did something that others were not doing. And now those others are crying because they've lost huge sums of money in quote unquote crypto. Whereas, my ambitions were in a certain sense more humble, but also more enduring. What's the lesson there? The lesson there is that this is one of the last remaining ways that ordinary Americans can right now participate in, tell technology what to do, in a way that builds and preserves the inherited way of life that so many of us still consider to be at least better than the alternatives available, and after all ours, and if not this, then what's going to replace it? Something much worse. That is important. You look at the kinds of technologies that are being labeled dual use technology, dangerous military technologies. Oh, we can't sell these chips to China and Russia. They're dual use technologies. I mean, these motherboards, these computers, these GPUs, these NVIDIA chips that are now being tightly regulated for sale. This is basically like gaming computer stuff. And sure enough, the state of California and a number of other states are banning the sale of high-powered GPUs to American citizens. Nobody needs that much energy. Nobody needs that much money. Oh, Bitcoin. Oh, it consumes so much energy. Yeah, how about like Call of Duty? That consumes a lot of energy too. Is that going to be next to be banned? Well, maybe. And maybe we'll be in a position where, there are only going to be specific forms of online entertainment which you are required to participate in. And that's the direction that things are going in. Bitcoin is one of the few technologies that, it came from crypto, from cryptography. That was a military technology. I mean, this is the America that we live in, where all the things that we use to entertain ourselves are basically repurposed military technologies. And for the folks in charge to say, oh, no, this is much too dangerous for the likes of you, you have to trust us to build a system out of these weapons that'll keep you safe. I don't think that's very persuasive. I think people are looking for an alternate. People are looking for a way out that doesn't involve abandoning America and the way American life works. And this is an important part of it. If we don't protect the ability of Americans to do that, a lot of folks are going to find themselves at a complete dead end.
Well, you fell right into my trap. I knew I could goad you into a strident defense of the principle, and I'm glad for that. I just want to say one thing. All right, the New York Times Deal Book conference that James mentioned. Okay, this is Wednesday evening. We're like well into this, and Sam Bankman-Fried is still listed as a top billing on the Times Deal Book. And the funny thing is the Times has been so careful in how they have been talking about this entire issue. They have an article dated the 15th it's a long interview with Sam Bankman-Fried's therapist, who was also the performance coach at FTX. And he's just saying things like, gee, I'm really surprised about this. Here's what he says. Dr. Lerner said he was shocked by the suggestion that Mr. Bankman-Fried was a criminal mastermind. I just can't see him doing that, honestly, Dr. Lerner said. I guess maybe I would have to sit down with him and understand why, but I have difficulties making that jump. And he's just going on about how, they're just a bunch of nerds. They just like to play chess, and they're really good-natured people. They're very they just have, they're undersexed. They don't date. They don't do anything. I mean, he's like, you've seen how he dresses. He's not interested in money or greed or anything like that. I don't know what the New York Times is links are to this whole crazy nexus, but I suspect it'll come out eventually. But they're clearly being very defensive. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. It's really funny.
Yeah, I mean the ties, all of the usual cast of characters are involved, and I feel at this point there's only, as you said, Seth, we've sort of only scratched the surface of all the ways that they are involved. I mean, the Democratic donations thing is enough in itself, right? Mom on the faculty at Stanford getting money from Silicon Valley to give to Democrats, dad working with Elizabeth Warren. Now this guy creates this Ponzi scheme basically to give money to midterm candidates for the Democratic Party. I think it was James who said he was George Soros in training, and it's true, but it's also it's such a grift at this point. The kind of weird internecine. It's air built on clouds, built on nothing, and I have to feel as if people are. I mean, that's to me the best argument actually. For crypto, and this is in some ways what James is already saying, but it's the sense that people have that officialdom is just completely fake and also totally inaccessible to them, and will we ever get to the bottom of it, and will anybody suffer any consequences? At least in in spirit, or like potentially that sense is answered by the idea that you would have like a digital way of kind of managing your own assets and being able to kind of have more ownership over it. James mentioned in passing that, you know, Donald Trump announced his bid for the presidency yesterday. We haven't talked that much about it, and I don't think we will. We're kind of running out of time. Also, this was an expected thing. I mean, I read his speech. People are calling it low energy, which I didn't think that was an accurate description. I thought it was sort of a usual Trump speech, but I was sort of looking through just to see like what the big policy issues are in it, which is something that you actually can do, you know, if you work at it, you know, and Common Core. The wall seems to have kind of receded into the background. Anyway, what am I saying? I'm just saying that like there is in the background, Donald Trump has announced his bid for presidency. It does not strike me as something that has given any more clarity about the issues we've already talked about on this podcast, nor to show us like where the 2024 race is headed. But we should just briefly mention it. And if you guys have anything more to say about it than that it happened, have at it.
Well, it seems to me like there's an issue, which is that Trump will command probably 20% of the Republican base, if not more, who are going to be very loyal to him. And, you know, the elites are clearly trying to stage a pivot away from him. But, you know, I think there's still blood to be drawn on this. Much as people would like him just to go away, I don't, you know, he's clearly not.
Yeah, the other thing that happened recently is that DeSantis said basically what we've already observed, which is that his strategy is going to be to shrug off and ignore the attacks, and we will see where it all is headed. In the last brief time remaining to us, there was one other thing we wanted to just bring up, and that is that Canada has this medically assisted. It's a truly sinister euphemism. It's called MAID, and it's you know, euthanasia. Initially, you know, for people whose deaths were you know, obviously foreseeable, people that were wanting to have a like medically induced death rather than a death by the terminal illness that they had. But they are now moving in the most permissive direction of, you know, by far, not of any country, but really, you know, pretty high up there, and certainly chilling because they're so nearby. They will allow medically assisted dying for the mentally ill soon. Some really nightmarish videos have been circling around on Twitter. One guy saying, you know, I'm impoverished and I'm in chronic illness and I can't get medication and I don't want to die, but it's better than the life that I have. So, you know, really bleak stuff. And as somebody said on Twitter, which I thought was kind of funny, is the slippery slope remains undefeated. This was exactly what we were told, like, you know, would never ever happen. Now, here it is. I mean, it strikes me as a very good argument for whoever ends up being a political leader on the right to insist upon like humanity as a central issue, right? Something upon which our founding regime depends is like a meaningful definition of the word person and an understanding of, you know, the just irreducible value of a person in the sight of God and therefore in reality. But yeah, I mean, this is like, I don't think we've heard the last of this in Canada either. What do you guys make of that?
Not the last of it in Canada, not the last of it here. You know, this is why Trump missed an opportunity to talk about this stuff. It is absolutely carrying on without citizen control, and it is imposing controls on citizens. And people are catching on that, you know, somehow, no matter how bad things get, no matter how lowered our expectations, lowered our horizons, lowered our standards of living, no matter how dark and depressed people get, how much more expensive things get, how harder it is to get ahead, the technology continues to advance, and not just advance generally, but advance in very particular directions. Directions that are fundamentally at odds with who we are and why we are here. That said, I agree that the speech was not particularly low energy. I mean, look, this was a pretty intimate affair. It was like at Mar-a-Lago. It's sort of a hometown audience, just kind of standing there, hanging out, light, festive. I mean, I think the event was scaled to a size where it would have been a little bizarre for him to be in sort of full-throated sort of stadium mode. We'll see. It's very early. It's already 6 years since 2016. There's a lot of road still left to run. But I'm telling you, if somebody steps forward and really takes charge of the tech issue, then that's going to clarify things, and it'll, I guess, shake up what's becoming already the race for the White House again.
I think, as I said, I don't have much more to say than I have already said on this, because we don't really seem to have much more new information. But it does strike me that what people are interpreting as low energy is kind of a general lack of clarity, like a non-definition as of yet of what the issues are on the table for people to be fighting over, and what what would be the build the wall of 2024 as 2016's rallying cry, which was so much more than the wall, but was sort of the symbolic idea about national security, taking control, and so forth. I think that is still kind of an open question, and that these issues that we have been talking about, right, humanity as a sacrosanct kind of fundamental entity of value, and the shape of the American regime as founded around humanity and its value, and its investment by God with certain inalienable rights, these would be good things to sort of start with, and on every issue that we've been talking about, from MAID made to the questions about how should we manage our finances, and what should Americans be allowed to do, so to speak, in their in the privacy of their own homes and within their financial interactions with one another. It does seem like crystallizing that issue would be a helpful way to start even thinking about what should be going on in 2024. And with that, I am going to bring us to a close, as we have run out of time once again. Thank you all for listening to the Roundtable. I am going to plug James's book, since we talked about it a lot today, and you will benefit enormously from it if you haven't read it already. James, it can still be found on canonic.xyz, right? Is that where people go to get it?
Yes, that's right. You can buy it in BTC, BSV, or BCH.
Okay.
If that means nothing to you, don't stress out about it. The onboarding process is pretty straightforward. And if you really feel that you must not involve yourself in crypto, just do it once and you'll get the book, and then you'll get more value out of Bitcoin than what all of the scammers have won and lost over the past year.
Yes, it's more valuable.
Amen.
More valuable than an FTT token, but that's a very low bar, and it doesn't even come close to estimating how much you will get out of Human Forever. I'm also going to plug my book, since some of these issues come up in it as well. It's called How to Save the West, and I'm a normie mid, so you can get it on Amazon or wherever books are sort of quote unquote traditionally sold. Hope you enjoy it. That's a pre-order. It comes out in February 14th, 2023. And with that, if you want to learn more about Claremont, you can visit our websites at americanmind.org, claremont.org, clearmontreviewofbooks.com, and our DC-based Center for the American Way of Life at dc.claremont.org. You can donate to support the show at claremont.org/donate. And really importantly, don't forget to rate, review, share, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. That is how more people can find out about us. We love new friends, so please share it around. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you next week.